Farlost, created by John Miro.
55. Zeus, Taggart hissed, whirling and staring into the void ahead of Betty and Six. Whoa! Stuart Beecham jumped and looked up at the security officer. Too much coffee, big guy? I'm a little busy here saving the day. How about you sit down and relax? He split his attention between his suddenly jumpy bodyguard and the numbers on the screen. At Commander Montaigne's request, he'd run them again. Then, as he sat back and waited, he ran them again and again, haunted by the specters of the faces he'd floated past and ignored for months in the hallways of HHL 6. He'd always considered them borderline mentally deficient. Now, though, their lives were in his hands. That made every calculation life and death. He squeezed his wrist through his spacesuit. Phantom pain from Captain Travis's ID injection pestered him there, but not enough for him to take off his glove. He felt itchy enough just leaving his helmet visor up. He felt more than twitchy about the idea of automated weapons coming online all over Betty once the boomer boarding parties reached them, and he hoped the injection would keep him from being blasted the same as the drug-crazed tumbler soldiers that were on their way. He shook himself and reread his code and math and tasked Daisy with double, triple, and quadruple checking his work. He knew the work was good. His work was always good. But still, life and death. No errors. They were ready. Taggart was facing away from them still as a statue, but radiating intense stress. So long as he's quiet, Stuart thought and shrugged. He flinched as his arm flared with pain where Burkov's suicide bomb had caught him. Damn it, Burkov! What the hell were you thinking? Crazy mother... He breathed in little hisses until the pain eased up. I could have died, Stuart thought. Or worse. He looked over at the statue of Stan and the nav officer, Okoro, life functions suspended inside Gruber's mysterious silver coating, on the brink of death, and berated himself for complaining about getting cut up a little. He wondered if he'd ever again get to cuss Stan out for his sloppy handwriting. Suddenly he felt like he was swallowing a bowling ball. He shook his head, shoving Taggart and Zeus, Stan and the girl, and the bowling ball of doom behind a soundproof door in his mind. He slammed it shut. It was all about the numbers. That's how he'd help. That was his superpower. That's why Daisy was sulking and not talking to him aloud right now, he figured. She hadn't found any errors in his math. That had to bug her, he thought, since she was basically an AI with sap instead of superconductors. He thought it would do her a little good seeing a meat stick show her up at numbers and such. He rubbed his hands together. So many new equations and data points filled his head about the universe since his arrival in Farlost, all of which confirmed his theories and life's work. He didn't blame Daisy for being grumpy with him. She wasn't used to not being the smartest person or thing or whatever in a room. He watched the simulations again, this time just appreciating the beauty of their design. We're good, he muttered. This will work. He risked a look out the illusory bubble of space that surrounded him, finding the tram and the boomers were now swooping closer and closer to the crosshairs he and Daisy had plotted. Zeus! Taggart spat again. Man, he sounded pissed, Stuart thought. He wondered what Zeus meant here and now to Ron. Then he sunk back into the numbers, wondering what other out-of-the-box application of his life's work he could spin. Spears instead of shields? He couldn't wait to see what he would think of next. Well, okay, he hadn't thought of the spear trick, but he'd made it work, and in less time than pizza delivery. Taggart was still radiating intensity and all but staggered, head craned to face the little gold medallion IDing the guard ship on the observation window. Stuart tuned him out, willing the targets to reach the crosshairs he had programmed at the exact time he had programmed. They're pouring on the speed, Beecham cried out, pointing at the blown-up view on the side of the observation deck. I am ready to adjust calculations in real time if necessary, Daisy assured him. Stuart was on his feet. Yeah, he screeched, you better. The two alien spaceships streaked closer, puffs of flame and weird heat waves appearing in the magnified windows showing the craft up close. His eyes were glued to the scene. Those little dumbbells on the screen weren't just variables in a lab experiment. They were killers. "Closer," he whispered. "Closer, you murdering—" Any second now they'd cross the lines he and Daisy had programmed in space. Suddenly, the two dumbbells broke apart as if cleaved in two by invisible blades. Then they further broke into dozens, then hundreds of pieces of debris, while the tram streaked safely out of sight below the Betty's wing, bound for the cargo bay for docking. Stewart whooped as gases and fuels from the boomers burst into multicolored flames. Most of the debris hurtled harmlessly away on other vectors, but acceleration was still carrying some of the wreckage straight for Betty and Six. Stewart screwed his eyes and stared hard at several of the shapes still on course. Daisy threw yellow circles around some of the smaller pieces that appeared to be writhing. 7 of the boomer crew are projected to survive and reach the Betty and Six. First contact will occur in 27 seconds. Stewart's eyes widened. 7 of those monsters? The bowling ball was back, and cold as ice in his guts. Helpless, he stared out the observation window. There was nothing else he could do. Now people would have to fight those things, or they'd rip Betty apart, or at the very least slow her down until the guard ship that launched them caught up. He ran his knuckles over his lips, remembering they were still one miracle short. Assuming they survived being boarded, they still had no engines, thanks to Burkov's explosive suicide. They still needed a way to outrun the bad guys. He lost that thought, seeing beams of light grow from the surface of Six and the Betty, turning some of the incoming tumblers into flaming sushi. Not enough, though, he saw. The beams missed several of the yellow circles. Killer alien kamikaze soldiers were about to invade the two ships, and people were going to die. Stewart knew it. He felt it in a way he'd never felt before the accident that had brought him to Farlost. "What do we do now?" he screamed, his mind racing in search of some untapped option. "How do we keep them away?" He didn't want to die. He didn't want anyone else to die. "There are no remaining options, Dr. Beecham. You have done all you can. Now we must wait." Just sit back and wait, Stewart thought. No way, not with a flying coffin and the bad guys still out there and coming. "I'm not waiting." Beecham began to pace, tapping his knuckles roughly on his chin. "Time to think outside the box," he muttered, eyes fixed in helpless dread, as the first black tumbler exoskeleton, its long tentacles stretching out, came closer and closer to the surface of Betty and Six. Voices filled the line, calling out visuals, coordinating the defense of the two ships. All while Stewart could only watch. "Wish we could just nuke you, son of a—" He froze in place, eyes growing wider and wider as he tracked that thought back. Then he whooped, and he jumped clear of the deck. His eyes bounced around in his skull, poking his new last-ditch plan for holes. Beecham ran back to his holograms, skidding to his knees in the midst of them, fingers already flying through his reference designs. He found the one he wanted and flung it at the pile of windows that represented Daisy. "Heat shields!" he giggled. This is a model for deploying force fields to protect a craft from the heat and friction of re-entry, Dr. Beecham. While the Thorn has attempted to manipulate gravity to capture our vessels, it is not capable. Oh, trust me, Daisy, and do what the funny little monkey tells you to. Have Gruber let me know as soon as the tram's hitched up. "Captain Travis, Commander Montaigne," Stewart called out again. "I could get us out of here before the guard ship catches up. There is one catch, though, Commander." One ear open for the captain and commander's response, Stewart had already dived back into the numbers. This time, though, he was the one checking Daisy's math. He was so absorbed he didn't hear Taggart whirl about with a gasp, staring Thornward now. "Save," whispered Taggart. Then his face broke into a beatific smile. "It's coming to save."
Farlost. Music by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Learn more at servingworlds.com. Hi, John Miro here. Farlost is brought to you by my backers at Patreon. Patronage starts at $1 a month, or about 25 cents a cliffhanger. patreon.com. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support.